Hi, I'm Rabbi Austin Zoot, and welcome back to the channel. In the last couple of weeks, we've been exploring all the cool places that Judaism hangs out so that we can bring a little bit of that Judaism into our everyday lives. And I'm coming to you from one of my favorite places in my life, which is my library. This is my Jewish library, which has grown quite a bit since I started being a rabbi. And I wanted to talk a little bit about why is it that we, the Jews, are often referred to as the people of the book. Because when you think about scholarship, when you think about learning and wisdom and shared tradition, Judaism has a deep, diverse, and wide array of texts and books and scholarship that all bring us back to how do we make Judaism meaningful in our lives. Now, of course, when we talk about we are the people of the book, most often we're referring to this book right here. This is the Tanakh, also known as the Hebrew Bible, and if you're coming from a Christian perspective, they call it the Old Testament, although we just have the one Testament when you're talking to us about ourselves. This is the central book of our wisdom. Just about 2,000 years old, we've been playing with, engaging with, and asking questions about what this book contains for as long as there has been a Jewish people, at least in our modern conception of Judaism. And so it makes sense that if we're going to have this conversation, we have to start here. Except when we continue the conversation to explore where our library goes next, so much of the subsequent works have to do with commenting on what people read in that Hebrew Bible. And so it makes sense that our next books that we would look at are these right here. This is the Rashi commentary on the Torah. This is 5 books dedicated to the first 5 books that are contained in that Tanakh I just showed you, that Hebrew Bible. This is one man's interpretation, looking almost 1,000 years after that book was finalized, and asking the question, what does this all mean? How do I make this work in my life? And how do I apply these values to a reality that's pretty far removed from the original contexts? We still read this book today. When I'm looking for sermon ideas or I'm looking for how to interpret something, I'll still go to Rashi and I'll still ask, 1,000 years ago, how were you thinking about these things now that it's my turn to try and confront that same reality? Lest you think, though, that we stopped doing this work, at Rashi, we have examples of Torah commentaries and commentaries in general far beyond. One of my favorite examples is the Altar commentary. This is a 3-book set dealing with that whole Hebrew Bible, the whole Tanakh. This was published in 2019. We're talking about a book that is even closer to my context because I was in rabbinical school when this was finalized. This is a text that explores what does it mean to find the same values that we read in Torah, but apply them not only to our lives today, but to also try and use the history that we have to put these things in context. What was going on at the time that the text was written? How has the text been interpreted? And how do we continue to use this textual tradition to find more and more meaning and ideals and values as we continue to evolve? Now, if you see, this is a scope that just keeps getting wider and wider. We've zoomed in from that central text, that Tanakh, that Hebrew Bible, and then we keep seeing more and more generations adding their layers of interpretation, their own understandings of how we bring this stuff into our lives. And I want to show you one more book. This is a book that was written in 2008. It is a novel. It's called the Yiddish Policemens Union. It's written by a guy named Michael Chabin. And this book is essentially a murder mystery novel. Except it takes place at a time in Jewish history that Chabin invented. And it plays with culture and ideas of history and ideas of belief and faith and practice of Judaism. This book might not actually belong on this shelf, but it certainly belongs in this library. Because throughout the ages, our people have used the central basis of our tradition to tell ourselves stories, to come up with different interpretations for how do we make sense of the world around us? How do we entertain ourselves? How do we teach a lesson without just repeating what the last generation said? This book is a perfect example of the work we do to use some creativity and some innovation to try and reimagine what are the lessons like in a different world than maybe the one we occupy. And with one little shift, how would Judaism look different? And how would we be able to put it into practice? Now, this library is vast, it's diverse, it contains all kinds of different things. And if you're spending the time trying to guess where do all these things fit together, there are things on here that actually have very little to do with Judaism, but I, as a Jew, read the book and internalize it in a very special, unique way because of all of the other books and how they all fit together. And so, if you love to read, I guarantee there is a Jewish book out there for you that can help you explore what does it mean to bring these values to life, and how do we continue to make the learning we do intentionally, thoughtfully, and meaningfully Jewish. Thank you for sharing a little bit of my Jewish library. What are some of your favorite Jewish books? What are some of the books that you read that might not be intended as Judaism, but you read some Jewish values into them? I want to hear, what does your Jewish library contain? Let's continue the conversation, and I look forward to seeing you next week.